What is up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a video that I am super excited about because it is about a camera that I absolutely love and has been a huge part of my film photography journey so far. So I've shown and talked about this camera very briefly on my channel before, but it is the Fuji GS645S. When people have seen it pop up, I've definitely gotten comments to talk about the camera, so I wanted to do a video dedicated to this camera today. I've had it for probably about 6 to 7 months at this point, so I've definitely gotten a good amount of use out of it, and I've experienced both the pros and cons of the camera, so that's what we are going to be chatting about today. So a little bit of an intro to the camera itself. It is a medium format camera. As hinted at in the name, it is a 6x45 file format, hence the name Fuji GS645S. And you can actually see it on the top here. It is a rangefinder style as well. Also, you can tell by the fact that the little optical viewfinder is off to the side. Unlike an SLR or single lens reflex camera, you're not actually looking directly into the lens because it's not being reflected off of a mirror into the viewfinder. You're actually looking at an image through the optical viewfinder. The little guest. You're actually looking at an image through the optical viewfinder, which is actually a little bit offset from the lens itself. So that is what basically any rangefinder camera is like, and the GS645S is a rangefinder camera. Another thing is that it does have a built-in light meter, however, it also works completely manually without a light meter if you don't have batteries in there. And it has a fixed 60mm f4 lens. So that is an overview about the camera. Again, I usually don't go into too deep of a tech deep dive on cameras themselves because they're really easy to just Google and look up. So I would rather spend time focusing on some of the pros and cons that I've experienced personally from using the camera. Starting off with the pros. The first is obviously its size. If you can tell how small this is, it is incredible for a medium format film camera, especially when compared to things like the Pentax 6.7, or if you have the twin reflex cameras, which are like the more larger boxy ones, or any of the SLR style medium format cameras, which are huge and heavy because they're actually pretty durable in terms of the metal material, but at the same time not too travel friendly. So this is an amazing camera. I've traveled with it, I've flown with it, I've brought it with me on hikes, and overall the size makes it so dang awesome. So that is the size and the weight. This is very comparable, at least what I've seen online because I don't own it, to the Mamiya 7. It looks very similar to that style of camera. But that leads me to the next thing. It is way more affordable. So I actually purchased this in really great condition from a seller on Facebook Marketplace who he took really great care of this camera, and I got it for about $500. I'm pretty sure I got it for $500, which is an amazing deal for one, a camera of this quality, and two, for a medium format camera in general. If you look at, again, the Mamiya 7 or the Pentax 6.7, some of these larger, more well-known cameras, they're gonna run you well over $1,000 easy, and some medium format film cameras being sold for upwards of $2,000 as well. Granted, those are going to give you larger file formats. Those are like 6x7 file formats, whereas this is the smallest medium format film format that you're going to get is a 6x45. So in terms of like resolution, which you get with larger film formats, you're not going to have as high quality as a 6x7 camera may give you, but you also get more shots per roll. And honestly, even a 6x45 film quality is still incredible. So next pro is definitely the ease of use. I picked it up very, very quickly, and when I bought this camera, I was actually still quite new to the film photography world in general, but there are tons of tutorials on YouTube that you can find to load the camera. It's really easy to load, to unload, to take photos with, to just operate in general, change batteries. Like anything you need to do with the camera is super easy, super convenient, and there's tons of resources online for you to go find how to do each thing. The next pro is the amazing photo quality. So like I said, even though it is only a 6x45 film format, like 35mm film already is pretty good, at least for what I do, and that's just shooting photography as a hobby. But the 6x45 is incredible. Like the images I've gotten out of this camera are beautiful. It's a combination of the glass and also the fact that it is a medium format film camera, but the lens quality is amazing. Shooting on medium format film gives you a little bit of a higher resolution. The next pro is the built-in light meter. So if you watched my Olympus OM10 video and review on the OM10, a built-in light meter is very, very important for me and for a lot of people who do like to shoot film on the go, because you're not always going to want to meter with an external light meter or guess with, well, make an educated guess with Sunny 16 method. Sometimes it's really nice to just have that built-in light meter so that you can see if your photo is properly exposed while you're looking through the viewfinder. And the last pro that I have that I wanted to mention is the fact that it doesn't require batteries. So some cameras that use batteries also require batteries, which makes it a little bit difficult because when it comes to film cameras, you don't have like a battery percentage written on an LCD screen to tell you when you need to charge your battery or replace your batteries. So it is nice that you have the ability to shoot it without batteries. One, if you prefer, but also two, if it runs out of batteries and you don't have backups. Again, you're not going to be able to use the light meter without batteries. So I would always want to have working batteries in there and utilize the batteries, but again, it gives you flexibility depending on your shooting style. So moving on to the cons of the camera. There are a few cons of this camera, and I will preface this with saying, while these are cons, I still think the pros highly outweigh the cons, so I don't want it to sound like I'm complaining a lot about the camera, because these are just more minor details. So the first is that because it is a rangefinder style camera, you don't see through the optical viewfinder what your lens is gonna pick up and expose onto the film. The main reason why this is a con is because there have been probably a handful of shots, only about 3 or 4. I've accidentally taken photos with the lens cap still on, not realizing it was still on, because I'm looking through the optical viewfinder, and the optical viewfinder literally is just like this clear glass that I'm looking through and not actually what I'm taking the photo on the lens. And even with all of that, the light meter still works with the lens cap on. Like everything seems like it's gonna shoot fine until you actually take the photo, look at your camera, and realize that the lens cap was still on. Again, it's just something that you have to get used to if you're already used to shooting on a rangefinder camera elsewhere, or a 35mm rangefinder camera. This is probably not a big deal for you, but since my 35mm film camera is an SLR, it definitely took a little bit of getting used to. The next con also comes with the fact that it is a rangefinder camera, and that is just the way that the camera focuses. So when it comes to an SLR camera, you have these two semicircles, and when you're focusing it and focused the image, the semicircles will line up in the middle of the viewfinder, and in addition to that, your image itself becomes clear, so you know like what's in focus. When it comes to focusing a rangefinder, it is quite different in that you have almost like two images. You have a ghost image and then you have your actual image, and you want to focus and focus and focus until those two items line up. So really, if I was trying to focus on this plant behind me and it was out of focus, I would see this plant and a faint copy of this plant, and I would want to focus it until the two line up. I don't know if any of that made sense. but I hope it did. My main complaint here is that I don't know if it's a rangefinder in general or if it's specific to this camera, but the ghost image can sometimes be very difficult for me to find. So a lot of times I actually use this camera primarily for landscape shoots where I either have a very still image in front of me that I'm capturing so I can take as long as I want to focus, or I automatically know to focus it at infinity and don't have to worry about focusing up close. I would say it's easiest to focus an image where there is a high contrast object. So for example, I was out shooting landscapes and I took a picture of my digital camera on a tripod, and it was really easy to focus because the tripod is like really dark and black, whereas the background or the landscape was snowy and light. So it's easy to find when there's that contrast and focus the ghost image. But sometimes it's not so easy when you're working with a lot of texture in a photo or very similar textures in a photo or similar colors. It's hard to find the ghost image to focus. The next con is super nitpicky, but it is the fact that the ISO dial is actually very difficult to turn. Which, if you can see, it's so tiny here, and the little ridge is so tiny, and it's pretty, like, there's a good amount of friction as well, so it can be difficult to turn. But it's also not a huge problem for me because I always shoot with Portra 400 on medium format, so it doesn't change at all. But if you're someone who is constantly using different film stocks, it might get a little bit annoying after a bit of time. But again, super nitpicky, totally recognize that. The next con is the fact that I've heard this camera has a very delicate lens, and this is why this like little crowbar looking thing exists around it. I don't really think this thing would actually protect that much, but it's nice to have, I guess, around there. But that is something to keep in mind if you're doing a lot of traveling or adventuring with this camera, which is something that I like to do because it is so lightweight and easy to carry. It is something that I always keep in mind when packing it and where I pack it in my bags, just so that I'm not putting it in a position where the lens could break if it really is fragile like people say it is. I haven't had any issues so far, but again, I'm also extra careful about it, so it's something good to know. It's just a little bit unfortunate because it's so easy to travel with this camera, but at the same time it's supposedly pretty fragile. The next thing is that it only shoots up to 1/500th of a second for shutter speed. This could be an issue depending on the type of film stock that you're using when you're shooting it out in the world, but that is something to be aware of the limitations of. For me, I haven't really had too much of an issue with this so far, but I honestly can't remember if it's because I simply chose not to take that photo, if the light meter was giving me super overexposed, or I just haven't been in a situation where it has been an issue. I honestly don't know, but it is, again, a certain limitation that you face that is always better to be aware of before you bring the camera out. And then the last thing that I would have to say is a con about this camera is simply that it is a fixed lens. It's a fixed focal length, and then it only goes up to f4. So again, depending on where you're shooting and what you're shooting, this could be a major limitation for you. But again, for me, it hasn't caused an issue so far at all. Typically, if there's something like this where I am going out to shoot with one lens or there's a fixed lens on a camera, I make the situation work for the camera. I will back up or go closer to the subject as needed to make it work. So it's not really a big deal, but again, it still is a limitation that you should be aware of in case that is something that you are very accustomed to, is of having interchangeable lenses and having them with you whenever you go out to shoot. So overall, I love this camera, and there haven't been a ton of reviews that I read on this camera before of people who didn't. It's a great camera. I think at the end of the day, the main things for me are the fact that it is so small and compact for a medium format camera and so light, but at the same time still puts out incredible images. I'm also a huge fan of the fact that it is a 6x45 film format, because that means I get the most bang for my buck in terms of the number of images I'm getting out of one roll of medium format film. So I hope you guys do enjoy this video, and always check out my Instagram for more sample photos if you feel like I haven't posted enough throughout the video. I'm definitely trying to improve on that, because that has been a good piece of feedback that I've been getting on some older videos that I've filmed. Go on over to my Instagram. I always hashtag or even mark in the caption what I used to shoot that photo, whether it's 35mm or medium format film, or like my Olympus or Fuji camera, what lens. All of that is usually detailed either in the caption or in the hashtags of each photo. So I did want to shout that out, because I've been seeing those comments and I think it's really great feedback, but Instagram is always a great place to see more. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoy content like this on film photography or Olympus or Fuji gear, be sure to subscribe to my channel as well, and I will see you all in my next video.